which is great, so welcome. And we will be recording this session, so if you have colleagues that you would want to share it with, there'll be some really useful content. Do let us know and we'll share that afterwards. So we'll just let you settle in. If anyone wants to introduce themselves over the Q&A, it's always good to know who we've got as well, so please feel free to do that. And then we'll just do a few introductions in a minute. I can see the numbers creeping up. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. If you're just joining us, welcome to the South East LEP hosted webinar on carers in the workplace. We're just starting in a moment. We're just waiting to make sure everybody's joined us okay via Zoom. Thanks to those that have joined us on a very, very hot day as well. Okay, so it's a few minutes past 2. Oh, we've got a Q&A already. Sandy, yeah, if you use the Q&A, you won't be able to use the chat. So the Q&A is what we're using today for the questions, just to keep things as simple as possible. So hope that's okay. If you've used that successfully, so we can see your questions, which is great. Okay, so I think we'll probably get started. Just to introduce myself, I'm Louise Aitken, Skills Lead for the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. The local enterprise partnerships exist across the country. We're set up to drive economic growth. I work with a skills advisory panel, which is joint hosting this webinar today. We're an employer-led panel. So we're really pleased to be hosting and to learn more kind of about support for carers in the workplace. We ourselves have a conference later in the year in October, so we'll keep you posted on that. And just very pleased to have you here and to be hosting today. I'll hand over to my colleague Ivona to say a few words about our Growth Hub.
Oh, hello, and I'm Ivona Bainbridge-Dyer, and I'm actually the lead for the Growth Hubs in the Celeb area. For those of you that don't know, we do have 38 of Growth Hubs across the country. These are sort of local public and private sector partnerships that are led by the local enterprise partnerships. Our Growth Hub joins up the national and local business support for businesses and sort of makes it kind of a one-stop shop for anything that businesses may need. And just to sort of give you a little bit of statistics, actually kind of since the start of coronavirus, we have supported over 14,000 businesses across Kent, Essex and East Sussex. So if you are a business that is joining us today and you do require support, please feel free to drop me an email. I'll probably share my contact details afterwards. Thank you. Louise, back over to you.
Thanks, Ivona. And we've just got a slide up now just to let you know a little bit about the administration. So in case you didn't hear earlier, you won't be able to see yourselves on camera, so don't be alarmed if you can't. We've set this up so that you just see the panelists today, but you can ask questions in the Q&A, and if you do, it would be great if you could use your full name just so that we know which organisation you're from. We will be sharing the slides and resources from the meeting with everybody that attended, and we'll be recording today also so that we can share this more widely afterwards, because we've had a lot of interest, but I think because we're in holiday season on a very hot day, we've kind of probably not got a full attendance today, but very welcome to everybody attending. And the kind of main purpose of today, we're really pleased to have Catherine and Mary, and Catherine first from Carers UK is going to take you through some slides now. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for everyone today for participating, as you say, on such a hot day. So I'm Head of Employment at Carers UK, and Carers UK has been going for 55 years as a charity, and our aim is to make sure that life is better for carers and that no one has to care alone. If the next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight a few very top-line facts and stats. For any one of us who may be a manager, business owner, or indeed an employee who's a carer, it's very important to just think about how big this issue is, how big and growing the issue of supporting carers in the workplace. Even before the coronavirus, we know that in the UK, every day, 6,000 people become carers. And by that, we mean any one of us who might be looking after a loved one who is older, disabled, or seriously ill. And caring can affect any one of us at any age, at any time, and it can last a lifetime. And I've got personal experience of this, having gone through quite a journey over the last 12 months with my elderly parents, you know, trips to A&E, hospital visits. Sadly, my dad passing away earlier this year, and then managing care for my mum. And it's something that so many people I speak to are going through. Can I have the next slide, please? What a lot of people in our network say at Carers UK, both businesses and individual carers, is that caring can be more challenging and feel different from day-to-day parenting, which of course many of us know can be challenging enough at times. But with caring, the support needs can be more changing, more unpredictable, often including potentially distressing events like hospital admission, very often end of life care, as I mentioned, and bereavement. Carers also in our networks talk about crisis or cumulative situations. You know, caring can happen overnight. Your dad can have a heart attack, your mum can have a stroke, or it can creep up gradually. You know, like one of your parents may have dementia and gradually be more dependent on you for support, and then you have to go through different stages of care. For all of these reasons, it's understandably often very hard to talk about at work or with friends. And I think for workplaces as well, whether large or small, the challenge is that carers aren't a sort of static group of employees. It's often a changing group as more people come in and out of caring situations. Have the next slide, please. I just want to highlight as well a bit of a research from Carers UK. So last year, 2019, we did some research, a big YouGov poll, to show how many people are actually juggling paid work with care. What we found was it was nearly 5 million, and this number had gone up a lot since the last census, 2011 census, when it was around 3 million people. So we know it's a growing issue. We also know that 2.6 million carers had given up work to care. That again was an increase since our last poll on this issue. And often giving up work to care wasn't because people felt they had a choice. When they were surveyed, it was often because they just didn't know where to turn for help. They didn't feel they could talk about it in the workplace, or they didn't know where to go to get support for cares outside from care and support services, and that can be really challenging. And over the last couple of years, that's been equivalent of 600 people a day in the UK giving up work to care. And of course, that can be a great loss for many employers and businesses, a loss of skills and experience in the workplace if people are having to leave work without really knowing where to go for support. Have the next slide, please. So just another bit of research to mention that during this year, during the coronavirus pandemic, we did a survey at Carers UK in April to find out what the impact was on people who were already caring. And we found that 70% of people surveyed were saying that they were providing more care as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. And we've been issuing more research over the sort of last few months, which is available on our website, carersuk.org, which shows the ongoing impact of coronavirus in different ways on people who are caring. But also since this research, I just wanted to also mention that during our annual awareness raising week, Carers Week, in the middle of June, we also launched some research, again, another big poll, which shows that since the coronavirus pandemic, 4.5 million people, 4.5 million new people had become carers. And that's a massive increase to the total. It means that about 7 million people at least are now juggling work and care, which is more like 1 in 4 in any workplace. So this is a really massive issue, and not one that's not likely to go away soon. Can I have the next slide, please? So just to say a little bit about how we support working carers at Carers UK and some insights from our Employers for Carers business forum. So we've been working with employers for nearly 20 years now, and in the last 11 years we've been running Employers for Carers, which has developed into a sort of subscription service where we provide practical support to employers, and actually importantly employers large and small from private, public and voluntary sectors also support each other and share tips and good practice, because often as an employer, if you see another business tackling something that you know you have in your workplace, it often makes more sense to speak to them and to connect with them than it does directly with us at Carers UK. So it's very much led by our members, and the insights that our members share can really help us as well, you know, reach carers earlier when you often become a carer when you're of working age. So that is very important to us as well at Carers UK. And just to move on to my final slide, please, I just wanted to share a few insights from our Employers for Carers forum. So over the years, we've talked to employers and worked with them and found out, you know, what is really helping in the workplace, what sorts of issues are they tackling that can help them to support and retain carers. And we've boiled it down to these 5 Ps, if you like: preparation, policy and guidance, practical support, peer support, and promoting support. And these 5 key points have really evolved into criteria of a new benchmark that we've launched. We launched this last year, called Carer Confident, and you can just Google carerconfident.org and see a bit more information about this and examples of what good can look like in these areas, whatever the size of your organisation. So just very briefly, for preparation, we're sort of really meaning making the issue visible in the workplace, having events or meetings like this, you know, talking about caring, doing things like audits or surveys of your workplace so that you're aware of who may be caring. And policy and guidance is often really practical things like flexible working and leave that can make a real difference. And in small organisations who may not have HR policies, it's about a statement or framework of support that's visible so that people know how they will be supported as carers, and so that managers know that too. And then number 3 is a big P, really, practical support. It's a nitty-gritty of making that policy or that commitment come to life, if you like. So things like, it ranges from simple adjustments, things like having a car parking space near the office if you've got someone who's in your team who's regularly got to go to hospital appointments for someone they're caring for. Things like being able to have your mobile phone on your desk on silent if you're expecting a call. It can be quite small, or it can range to things like having health and wellbeing support in the workplace, or for large organisations, things like employee assistance programs. And then number 4, peer support, is often about having a go-to person who's happy to talk about their experience of caring and, you know, can give tips to other people in the workplace who are caring. You know, often we know that it can really help as a carer to actually be able to talk to someone, you know, a human being who's been through this, who can give you some tips and, or just someone you can actually offload to that you feel comfortable speaking to. In some of the large organisations, they've been setting up carers networks, employee support groups, where this is a bit more formal and people can give each other support as carers. But in a very small organisation, it can be, you know, a go-to personal champion. And then finally, last but not least, promoting support. So again, things like this type of event, but also things like using other opportunities that you might have in your workplace, you know, maybe a health and wellbeing day, maybe a mental health awareness week, maybe something wider like diversity and inclusion events, but just thinking about how these can be, how caring is a large part of this, and very often, you know, making sure that caring issues, if you like, are included, as well as sort of parenting and other experiences that your employees may have. So I just wanted to pause there really and just flag those up as sort of top line points to hopefully help promote a bit of discussion and some questions. But I'm now going to hand on, if I may, to my colleague Mary for the next part of the presentation. Thanks very much.
Oh, apparently I was on mute. That's not terribly helpful, is it? Apologies for that. I was just saying that figure of 1 in 4 always really stuns me, to think about the amount of stress that must mean for colleagues who are juggling caring and working. Now we've got a few poll questions just to see how knowledgeable you all are. Amy, could you introduce those, please? So the first one is, which percentage of working carers used annual leave for caring in the last year? And I think Amy's going to tell me when we've got the votes in. Oh dear. Is that better? Can you see me now, Catherine?
I can see you.
Good. Have we got the poll voting responses in?
Yep, they should be on screen at the moment.
Yep, it is. Well, it's 80%. So when we roll that up, the consequence of that is that people aren't getting a break, which is the purpose of annual leave. Means that people are increasingly stressed and not getting the rest that they need. So we think about 25% of most workforces are using the majority of their leave for caring. If we could have the next one, please. Stress during COVID, nothing to do with the stress related to my dog, who seems to be scratching a hole to Australia in my rug. Wow, you're the first group that have got this right. Yeah, it's 100%. This was a survey that was done early on during the COVID lockdown. And people were stressed if they were normally a carer and they couldn't get to do their caring jobs. They were stressed if the normal carers couldn't get in to do caring, and if they were carers of somebody in their home, then their stress levels were increased because they couldn't leave the home to get away from the caring situation. So caring, occurs in all sorts of ways, but especially in that beginning phase, it was super stressful. And the final question, please. It is 70%, so the minority view. This was carried out during COVID as well. And I guess the increased awareness of the importance of carers contributed to that jump. The government is actually planning on bringing in statutory carers leave. It's proposing it will be unpaid, although Catherine and I would both argue very strongly that it should be paid. They're proposing on introducing 7 days of unpaid leave as a statutory right for carers. It was in the Queen's speech, and the consultation has just closed, I think, last week. So we're waiting to see what happens around that. So I'm just now I've only got, I think, 3 or 4 slides, hopefully leave us some time for some good debate. My name is Mary. I am an age specialist advisor to business and for the government's business champion, who is Andy Briggs, my group CEO at Phoenix. And I'm guessing that some of you might be wondering why a business person is concerned about carers leave. The reason is that we have an aging society, not just all of us getting older, but also as a society. And what that means is that right now, 30% of the working age population are over 50. And if any of you read the news yesterday, you'll have seen that it was the very young, the under 25s, and those over 50s who have already been most impacted by job loss in the recession, and that's going to increase because businesses tend to see age and experience as something that is not of interest. And we, combined with that, we know that when somebody older falls out of work, it's around 6 times more difficult for them to get a job than somebody with the equivalent skills who's younger. So from a business champion point of view, we have 30% of the working age population who are over 50. We have 1 in 4 of the working age population who are carers. And of that group, the majority are over 50. And it's the number one reason people who are trying to juggle work and care say they're going to give up work is because their employer isn't supportive and they just can't cope. They want to work, they bring great skills and experience, but employers aren't supporting it. So if we're going to make the best of this increasing long life that hopefully we can all enjoy, it means we need to keep being active and employed for longer to be able to save enough for that lovely long life. And I'm really concerned, I'm a pension specialist as well, thinking about the impact that not just loss of work, but loss of savings has on somebody if they give up work when they don't want to care for somebody else. Fundamentally, I don't believe somebody should be forced to give up work when they don't want to, just because they care and love for somebody. I believe that employers ought to be celebrating that skill set and giving flexibility in a much greater way to enable people to juggle as they do so brilliantly, to enable them to do both, to work and to care. Of course, some people absolutely want to give up and that's fine, but for way too many people, it's a choice they don't feel like they can make. Then once they've made the choice, they really struggle to get back into work. So why do I care? I guess the job point is that my motivation is because of my age specialism and understanding. From a personal point of view, it's because I've been a carer in 3 different circumstances. I was really lucky to be able to be with my dad while he was dying, because I had a supportive employer. And for anybody who's gone through that, you'll know it's not just being able to grieve after somebody's died. It's that real pain and wanting to be with other loved ones just before somebody dies, and that's what carers leave. It's one of the many things it enables. So it's personal and it's practical. I guess if we move on to the next slide, what I'll talk about is next slide. I always do this. I cover everything just by rambling on. So what should a business do, and what makes the most difference? So number 1 is absolutely being flexible. Now, being flexible, to my mind, doesn't mean having a flexible work policy, nor does it mean enabling people after 26 weeks of employment to be able to make a once-a-year request for flexible working as an adaptation of hours. That is the legal definition of flexible work. It's about thinking flexibly about how you can retain somebody who you want to keep and who wants to carry on working, but who also needs to do some caring. And that might be allowing a variation in hours. It might be recognising that sometimes people will have to leave early on a Friday. And at one stage I was driving 4 hours every Friday night and 4 hours every Sunday night, with 2 small children. And so sometimes on a Monday morning, I just needed a bit of time, or I needed to finish early on a Friday, but I absolutely put the hours in. So it's about flexibility. It's about offering people to have time off if they need it, and not always feeling that they need to make up with the work, because sometimes you just need to go and care. And it's not right and it's not feasible to ask somebody to take their laptop with them to a hospital bed. We wouldn't ask that if it was a baby who was critically ill. So why do we ask it when it's a parent or another loved one who's critically ill? I just don't get it. So I suppose my overall piece is think about people who are carers as if they have got responsibility for a very small child. The second thing is naming it and calling it carers leave, calling it carers support, calling it a carers group, because we also know that almost 70% of people who are carers and who work tell only one or two people who they work with that they have caring responsibilities because they're ashamed of it. And that absolutely stuns me, that people would be ashamed of something that is such a wonderful thing to do. Now, we're going to rerun this survey again to see if post-COVID, the reputation around caring has improved. I hope it has. But if you have a crisis leave policy, an emergency leave policy, a dependence policy, that's not a carer's policy. No, carers won't look at it and think, oh, that's for me. They will think that it's for absolute emergencies. And the government's own description says it's for something like at point of death care. And then the third thing is to support it. And as Catherine said, it's about allowing people to come together and to talk, maybe identifying somebody who has a child with autism and them being willing to share their experiences. So when in my last company, 40% of our carers group members were carers for children with disabilities or additional needs. So caring isn't just for older people. So support your workers by giving them flexibility. Be proud that they're carers and that you're supporting carers, and support people by allowing them to talk to each other in whatever way suits your organisation. And then the next slide, please. So the question I'm probably most often asked is, that sounds great, Mary, but how do you convince a company to introduce something that seemingly is only going to benefit the employees? So the first thing to that is, it's not just going to benefit the employees, because I guarantee that those people who are caring are already taking the time off that they need. It's just that instead of saying it's for their mum's doctor's appointment, they'll be saying it's for their doctor's appointment. Instead of needing to come in late because they've been up all night looking after somebody, it will be because they're ill that day. So by not having a policy, you're not going to stop people caring, you're just going to make them lie and feel ashamed about it and increase their stress levels, which will increase your ongoing absentee levels. So that's the first thing. So once you get to the position that, yeah, there ought to be some support in place, I'd say the first thing is the who, and I'd find somebody senior who has usually an elderly relative who's dependent on them. And quite often it's your most senior board member or CEO who's had to arrange for an elderly relative to go into a care home. Now, quite often they're lucky and have been able to fund that, but they will still have had the emotional experience and stress of having to sort something out. So undo that professional sheen and get to the human behind and talk to them about what you think needs to be introduced, and you will know what's best for your organisation. What I usually say is, you will absolutely have a parental leave policy, because that's a legal obligation. So whatever your parental leave policy is, just lift it and shift it and make it your carers leave policy. Now, the minimum, the statutory minimum for parental leave is up to 7 days unpaid leave and up to 4 weeks unpaid leave in every calendar year up until the child is 18. So the very minimum should be up to 5 days, sorry, up to a week's unpaid leave, and up to 4 weeks unpaid leave in any 12-month period. And that's super easy. You've got the policy. You literally just change the words to carers. When should you do it? Straight away. I've seen this be introduced in a matter of weeks because it isn't complicated. The tricky bit is the how. So as Catherine said, you have this cumulative or crisis moment when people become carers, and 6,000 people each day enter the caring community. A similar amount leave the caring community because the person they've cared for has died. And one of the things I didn't expect when I was running a carers group was that each month somebody would come to me and say, oh, I don't need to be in this group anymore because so-and-so has died. And it sounds a bit naive, but I just hadn't clocked that. I knew that new people were becoming carers, but I hadn't focused on the end bit, even though I'd been there myself. So communication. That's the challenging bit. Tell stories, encourage that person at the top to share their story, but keep that storytelling going. I think Centrica is the organisation in the UK that's had a carers policy for the longest that I'm aware of, over 10 years. And when I talk to them, their biggest challenge is still communication. It doesn't go away because your working population changes all the time. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, so now over for Q&A. And it would really help me and Catherine if we knew who it is that we have on. I think we've got NHS Social Care. Who are the other organisations? Do we have any employers or any carers or carer organisations here? If you could pop that in the Q&A, that would be really useful.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, and if we can encourage colleagues to start putting questions in, it would be great. We've obviously got a great opportunity to ask Mary and Catherine any questions you've got. And from a personal perspective, I'm learning an awful lot from you both. I think for us as an organisation, this is a new kind of area for us to be looking at. And I think it's fair to say that as you've reflected, often it's not employers' first thought, and so often people talk about caring for children and forget that there are a whole host of caring responsibilities that somebody might have. So it's really made me think, and I think as much as we can do to help spread the word, we're keen to do that. I guess you mentioned Centrica. Are there other kind of exemplar employers that we can encourage our employers to follow the lead of?
Yeah, so I imagine Catherine will talk about the Carers UK and Employers for Carers website, which has loads of resources, example policies, and other companies. So I'm a big fan of Employers for Carers and of Catherine's work. I think it's the single best resource that I've found. I've worked across 3 different companies and introduced carers leave. So I thoroughly recommend it, to save her having to recommend herself.
Thanks for that, Mary. Just to add that you can find it on employersforcarers.org. So on that site, you'll see examples of, the business case, why it makes sense. So BT, for example, has been a very long-standing member and did a lot of work very early on in introducing flexibility across the board and having a very active carers network, as well, as Mary has said, as Centrica. We've also got the Carer Confident website, so that's part of Employers for Carers. It's our benchmark that I mentioned that we launched last year. And so if you just Google carerconfident.org or see it on the Employers for Carers site, that's got examples of carer confident employers. So we've already had 20 plus employers take one of the 3 levels of carer confidence. So that will just give you an idea as well of which employers are engaging. Of course, there's lots of really good stuff going on, particularly we know from small employers that don't necessarily talk about it as we are carer confident employees. They just do it. They just know their staff and support them. So we're just keen to get the word out. So it's great to be able to participate today, just to help get the word out, because there's probably a lot of good practice and things happening that we don't know about as well. So the more we can sort of share not only the challenges, but examples of where employers have helped, the better informed we can all be.
Yeah, and I think, so I'm amazed nobody's mentioned COVID yet, and the biggest recession for, we'll see how long it goes on for, and the highest unemployment figures for more than a decade. It's shocking news, and sadly, I think it's only going to get worse in the short term. Now, that is putting unbelievable pressure on employers and employees, on the economy and on society. So I'm absolutely don't want people to think that Catherine and I are sitting here from ivory towers, thinking everything's okay. I would, I guess, pause to reflect on two things. The first one is that the importance of caring is even more important at the moment, and that if somebody is in a caring situation and your business is under pressure, there may be a way that it works for both parties to work flexibly to reduce hours, to save costs, but also to support carers. So I think people, companies and employers are thinking more flexibly at the moment. So think about carers in that situation, just as you might think about people with young children who might have wanted to take extra furlough or to extend furlough.
That's a very good point. And I would also just urge any employer just to signpost your staff to Carers UK's website, because it's all free help and advice and information. So just carersuk.org, and there's information about every aspect of life as a carer, you know, real tips, practical support for carers, because Carers UK is an organisation of and for carers. It's totally informed by, you know, members of the public that are caring, that ring us, that contact us. We've got a helpline which is free to call, so that's 9 AM till 6 PM Monday to Friday, where you can have a specialist advisor, you know, talking through your issue in detail, or you can email that advice@carersuk.org. So, you know, sometimes it can just be helpful as a manager, as an employer, just to sort of know where to, you know, signpost your staff as a sort of a first port of call, if you like. It's not that Carers UK is going to sort everything out, but just so that you don't feel quite so alone, and that you can just look at some advice information and think, well, this is one step, this is what I need to do next, you know, contact the local council, whatever it is. But we'll explain that in some detail. And Mary rightly raised the COVID-19 situation. So we've got guidance which is constantly updated on the Carers UK website, just under the advice and information section about COVID-19, including, it's updated very, very frequently. It links to the government guidance, but it's updated and written from the point of view of carers' questions. So there's frequently asked questions from carers, whole sections on working and caring, how do you, you know, protect the person you're caring for, really practical issues in different headings there. And so the government has actually also flagged it as well, and sort of signposted back to us. So just, you know, just so that you're aware that sometimes, you know, issues are often around stress about how do I get information support for care outside the workplace. So of course employers can't be expected to be experts on care, but there are ways that you can signpost your staff to information and support.
Brilliant. And I think often that's half the battle, isn't it? Because most employers want to do the right thing, and often it's either because it hasn't occurred to them, or they've, you know, they, as you say, they don't know what the right thing to do is. And so having that kind of help available, I think, is invaluable. Really, really helpful. We've had some comments through from Sandy. Hi, Sandy.
Could I just pick up on Sandy's questions, or maybe a bit of a Q&A, because I think it's there's quite a lot of overlap between the disability sector and the carer sector, because quite often, of course, carers are caring for people with disabilities, but also a lot of the issues that carers in an organisation have an overlap with people with disabilities. So we haven't mentioned carers' passports, but in a couple of organisations I've seen the carers and the disability community join together to introduce workplace adjustment passports. The idea of that is it's a single record that travels with you to say, this is the adjustment that I need, rather than having to go into long blown discussions about your your personal situation, be that your disability or your caring responsibilities. So my question to Sandy back is, have you come across that as something that you talk about? Don't know if we can unmute Sandy.
Are we able to bring Sandy in, Amy, or I don't know if the technology will allow it?
I don't know if we're able to, so apologies if I've asked something too complicated.
And just also to add that if you just go to carerpassports.co.uk, it's flagged on the Carers UK website, but there's a free resource just called carerspassports.co.uk, which Carers UK and Carers Trust have contributed to, where there's lots of examples of templates for carers passports and examples of these and how they can operate, both for employers, but also things like for service providers, carers passports for hospitals. But there's a section for employers with resources and things like template communications to help introduce one as well. So as Mary says, they are a very practical and useful tool actually to sort of help the conversation really between a carer and a manager initially, but also, as Mary said, for the employee to be able to take that with them if their line manager changes or their own role changes.
I think Sandy might be online now. Are you with us, Sandy?
Oh, look, I've blown the technology. Sorry, everybody.
No, it's probably me if it's anyone.
Gosh, it's warm, isn't it? Blimey.
It's incredibly warm, actually. I think we're all very good to be participating today, everyone that's joined us today.
Yeah, well, although my daughter's in Scotland and I'm feeling quite envious because it's a good 10 degrees cooler up there.
Yes, being north is quite a good idea at the moment.
So yeah, I think it looks like Sandy's online, but it might be that she has trouble with the sound as well.
No microphone on the computer. That's why.
No worries.
Well, I think that, hopefully that was helpful just to be able to think about the concept of passports and how there's an overlap in the workplace often with similar issues. So I think it's worth thinking more broadly about that. The other point I was going to mention that sometimes gets asked is back to, isn't this an additional cost? And I think as I mentioned when I was talking earlier, it's not an additional cost. Those people who have caring responsibilities will be doing that anyway. It can only add to an organisation's reputation to support carers. It doesn't add cost. It just increases advocacy in all of my experience across different organisations.
And presumably it can really help with retention and kind of keeping talent and stuff like that, because if employees feel supported and they're in a supportive environment, presumably they're more likely to stay.
Yeah.
I guess that's where the crux could come for some people. They think, well, my employer's not supporting me, I've got a lot to offer, but I'll move on elsewhere. So in terms of kind of skill shortages, I guess it's really important as well.
Yeah,
that's absolutely.
And whilst we're in a depression, there absolutely is a skills crunch. As you think about the engineering sector, all sorts of areas, it's not a universal depression. So I'm very aware that some organisations are really struggling for skills. And again, this is an opportunity to retain, but also to attract for those sectors.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And if I just add that, Mary mentioned Centrica earlier, so they're one of our sort of founding members on Employers for Carers, and as Mary said, have had a carers policy probably longer than anyone else, and they've done some costings, the actual cost savings to them for supporting carers, so both in the area of retention and also in the area of sort of improved productivity, less absenteeism as a result of caring. So the total costing of those was 3.1 million they recognised, that they reckoned on their bottom line. It's quite hard to cost because of taking caring out, extrapolating it from sort of wider flexible working and support, but they did quite a big piece of work on this, and it was absolutely making those points, on the retention, you're saving all the sort of recruitment, the retraining cost of taking on new staff, and on the you know, by actually providing carers leave and making it more transparent, as Mary had said earlier, what they found was their absenteeism rates were declining, and they just had a more productive workforce because it was just making it more transparent, and employees were feeling that they were recognised as carers, that they were supported, and they very often didn't take up all the leave that could be available. They probably took up, Centrica reckoned, about 3 or 4 days a year equivalent overall, which was really very little, you know, despite some line managers being a bit worried at the beginning about everyone would be wanting to take leave. So it just shows that real ability to sort of give that peace of mind to your staff can really help as well in terms of getting more from them, you know, more productivity, more loyalty, and also just bringing these issues to the surface, which is very important. So we've got that information, you know, on the employee website as well.
And just picking up on one thing there, Catherine, about how much it's used. I remember I had that exact conversation with one of my HR colleagues saying, well, aren't we just giving people who say they're a carer an extra week's holiday? It wasn't. So we ran a pilot absolutely to explore that point. So it's a 6-month pilot. At the end of that relatively short period, the average time that our pilot group of carers had used was 4 hours. So and they, you know, the feedback was stunning. It was just, wow, this is such an amazing benefit. It's like, we cherish this. Could you make it so that we can, you know, take it by the 30-minute? Well, actually, no, we can't do it by the 30-minute, but they were absolutely arranging meetings at the beginning or end of a day or a week, or extending their lunch hours by a little bit, because they were, this is, I don't know when I might need it, so I'm only going to use absolutely little bits when I have to, which was stunning and absolutely nailed the HR argument at the end of that 6 months.
It's that sort of thing so powerful, isn't it? Because as you say, you immediately kind of bust those myths that might with people's kind of initial instinct, especially if they're new to the concept. It's really powerful to be able to say that. And actually, to the productivity point, Catherine, and the fact that actually the bottom line is improved, because if employees feel sort of supported, and it helps with everything, doesn't it, like motivation and loyalty and all of those sorts of things. So they're really powerful kind of pieces of information, I would say.
I think it tackles the sort of, you know, so-called presenteeism. You know, Centrica felt that when people were working, they really were working. They were able to know where to go for help. They knew they had the carers leave if they needed it. They were signposted to outside sources of help and the health and wellbeing scheme, and they could be more focused with their work. So that's a win-win, really.
Have you got examples of more recent examples of companies that have sort of introduced those policies? Something, because obviously Centrica is a great example and been in place for quite a long time, but are there any sort of new companies sort of, you know, that sort of coming back into that, you know, coming into that area, that actually introducing those sort of policies?
Yes, I would say it's a good question. I would say actually we've never been busier at Employers for Carers than now. I think it's because the COVID-19 pandemic has really shone a spotlight on these issues. You know, more people have been talking about supporting family members and friends because it's been on the news so much, and because people have been recognising that they're actually doing this. So really our list of members, it's on our website, is kind of growing all the time. So we've got, you know, a number of members, so, you know, ranging from organisations like Royal Mail, you know, National Trust, smaller organisations as well. So it's you know, it's quite evolving really, and we've got, I mean, as an example, Santander Financial Ombudsman Service have recently commented, HSBC, you know, a lot of people have got champions and people in the workplace that are sort of recognising their caring and visibly blogging and talking about it. And we've also got an Employers for Carers LinkedIn page, where it's part of the Carers UK LinkedIn page. So we're beginning to get some, you know, members and others commenting on that as well. That's still quite new in terms of doing it that way. But I think, you know, the word is getting out. So it's difficult to pinpoint any one, just trying to think really. I mean, Nationwide has been a member for quite a while, but they've been more visible recently about saying about the benefits of actually having family support leave and carers leave. So they've kind of, you know, upped their provision, really following sort of greater awareness about the value of having leave, and the fact that it's not that everyone takes it all the time, but they felt they needed to make that more transparent and to
that sounds very encouraging. What about smaller employers? Because obviously Nationwide and Santander, these are big firms, these are big banks that can probably afford is the wrong word to use. What advice would you actually provide to those smaller employers that perhaps don't really have a HR department, probably one person supporting them, or even perhaps using an external organisation that sort of provides on the support when they actually require? What support is available for them?
That's a very good question. So basically I would say, if you just look at our Carer Confident, just carerconfident.org, and just look at, we've got a summary of criteria, those 5 Ps, and we've deliberately based those really on experience of employers large and small, because they can be applied and adapted really according to the size of your organisation. So as I said, you know, if you don't have policies, just having a very upfront statement, some might have a charter, framework, or just a very visible statement from the company owner or manager that you know, we recognise that staff will be caring, and you know, that we support that. We support conversations about caring. Something like that just raises a visibility. The other thing is that we're very aware that small businesses, you know, absolutely full on. We're all full on at the moment, and in fact, Carers UK is a small employer ourselves, so we know what that feels like. What we've tried to do is actually create a sort of what we call an umbrella membership, where a local authority can actually extend its ability to just spread the word about employers for carers. So all our resources can be accessed by the small and medium enterprises in that local area. So of course, a lot of businesses won't necessarily think to contact us, but I would say it's worth checking on our website. We've got a list of local authorities. It's a growing list of local authorities who have joined us, and as part of their membership, we encourage them to just spread the word and the access to our resources to small businesses in that area. Of course, it's you know, it's all about communication, as Mary said. You know, you've got to get the word out. So it'll take a little while, but we know that there are those umbrella memberships, lots of small businesses that are connected and engaged with our resources. We don't necessarily know what exactly examples of what they've been doing. We're trying to have those conversations through our umbrella members. So I would just say events like this are also a great way to start that conversation, because we know that people are being supported out there, but it's often not being described as, you know, a small business won't necessarily describe it as, I'm a carer friendly employer and this is what I'm doing for carers. They'll just say, this is what we're doing to support our staff. They won't necessarily sort of talk about it as carers. So, you know, it's great to keep this conversation with you and everyone in the region here. They get to know about good things that are happening that we won't. So, you know, how to spread the word and find examples of small businesses. Actually, we'd love to have blogs or examples of someone in a small business who's championing it or has been a carer themselves. That would be great, because you're right, you know, our forum, it does reflect more the big employers, because they're the ones that tend to contact us and connect. But we do want to reach everyone.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Catherine.
Could I just add, sorry, a little bit on there about SMEs? So usually what we find is that for organisations with fewer than 15 employees, they will just do it because they know the home situation of every one of their employees. There's a sort of a chunk between about 15 and 50 employees or 100 employees, where most of the payroll will be done by an accountant or by a payroll clerk, and they won't have HR people, policy systems. So that tends to be where our blank spot is. So I think there it is. There's an opportunity to differentiate by offering that.
Okay.
That's right. Actually, Carers UK itself is that size. You know, we've just got, we're under 100. We're more like 50 plus employees. So, you know, in a sense, we are operating as a small employer. So, and we're trying to do what we can for our own colleagues and staff, many of whom are carers.
We've had a suggestion in the Q&A, somebody saying, could employers offer initiatives for working carers provided by a business group for carers in particular localities, such as money off vouchers for some health and wellbeing treatments, which sounds like a great suggestion, actually. I suppose that's something we could explore locally, almost to celebrate and reward the good work. As you were saying, Mary, it's actually something to be celebrated. It's a huge skill, and it's a great asset to have people in a team that are doing those things, and good to be able to acknowledge it and celebrate it. So yeah, that sounds like a great suggestion.
It does. Catherine, one for you there. Employers for carers. Add it to the champion
yes.
carer criteria.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. It's a real example of
Carers Day. Yeah.
Championing. That's great. And I would also just mention we've got a free resource for carers called Learning for Living. So it's an e-learning resource. So if you Google it, or you can find it on Carers UK website, and it's the idea is that anyone who's a carer or former carer can take this, work through the modules. You get a sort of digital credential, but it helps you sort of map the experience and skills you've gained through caring. And the idea really is this could help anyone, if they're a working carer, just to sort of realise everything they're doing, which is marvellous, like time management, negotiating challenging situations, dealing with challenging behaviour sometimes, but just also the empathy and understanding and great skills of communication that you learn as a carer. But also it helps your confidence as a carer, but also helps put on the map a bit more the absolute value of what we provide as carers. So that again is a resource we hope just helps to raise awareness about the value of caring. It's not just something that gets in the way of work, it's actually something that has a real positive value as well, and can help someone have transferable skills in the workplace, or for volunteering or later lifelong learning or whatever. But just to, and we're encouraging our employers to take that resource among their workforce as well, to encourage people to be aware of that.
Brilliant. I think we'll be adding, that's all on our Growth Hub website, isn't it, Ivona, as well?
Yes, we have added all information. Yes, I had the privilege to watch one of your sort of previously recorded webinars. So yes, we've added all information about and the resources to our website. Yeah. So if anyone, obviously we will share all that information with the follow-up after this webinar, but otherwise if anyone wants to just Google is Southeast Business Hub, and information is in employers section. So yeah, we have added all that information. I think it's extremely important that employers are aware of what's available, and obviously and employees as well. So yeah,
that's great to hear that.
Yeah, and we'll continue to kind of share it widely. We've got, as I mentioned earlier, we've got an event in October, which is our skills advisory panel, our employer-led panel, and our digital skills partnership, because we're a pilot area for digital skills. So actually it'd be great we'll keep you posted, Catherine and Mary, because it would be good to involve you in that if possible, to help kind of spread the word further, because that would be a big event showcasing some of our sectors, because as you said earlier, we still have a lot of sectors experiencing skills shortages, so we're kind of keen to set out some of the opportunities in those. So it's a great opportunity to also talk further about what you're doing.
That sounds excellent. Yeah, very happy to help with that.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we're nearly at 3 o'clock, so the time has actually flown. Bearing in mind we're all in this stifling heat as well. It's
done very well, all of us.
Yeah.
And we had, as I said earlier, we've had a lot of interest in this. I think we haven't had a hugely high participant rate today, but we've had a lot of interest from people that want to catch up on it. It's just holiday season, I think, is part of the issue. But we're hugely grateful to everyone who's joined us today and for your questions. And as Ivona said, we'll be sharing all of the information from today, and happy to take any questions you've got after the event. But I think just that probably pretty much wraps us up for today, with a huge thank you to Catherine and Mary. We're really thrilled that you were able to join us here virtually in the southeast. Well, actually, you're in the southeast, aren't you, Catherine? So
right in Kent, actually, yes. So I am.
You're physically and virtually sort of with us in the area. But yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. And as ever, it's just been hugely interesting and helpful. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for everybody for joining us.
Here, here.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a nice cold drink, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tea.
Cheers.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very